Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're checking out a really small little item, pretty minor investment if you like, from Airtech Studios that recently hit the market. This is their inner barrel stabilizer. It's really pretty interesting what it does. I'm going to demo this today and give you my thoughts on it and show you a few different ways on how to install it. In the package, I'm going to open this up here, it's going to come with just your inner barrel stabilizer, which is this little guy right here, and an O-ring. I found this really useful for the crush washer that goes under flash hiders on M4 style guns, or fitting this under a suppressor on different models. The inner barrel stabilizer itself is a little over 1/2 inch long. It does have a flat head notch in there, so if for any reason you need to tighten it or get it unstuck, you do have the ability to do that. In theory, the inner barrel stabilizer goes inside of your suppressor. This one is for a 14mm negative thread, but there are a number of versions out there that fit all sorts of different variants. I think there's like 6 or 7 versions of this out there right now. I just have the standard 14mm negative version, and so I was able to try it out in 3 different suppressors. Here I have a Deepfire 200mm aluminum suppressor. These have been around for actually a while, and unfortunately nowadays you can't find them. I don't think Deepfire makes these anymore. They're pretty neat, and they used to be fairly inexpensive, right around like 30 bucks or so. These would come with a threadless cap, a positive threaded cap, and a negative threaded cap. Unfortunately, I just have the unthreaded and the negative threaded cap, which is just fine for this demonstration here. For my first suppressor test, I installed it just right in the opening of the suppressor, right where the barrel sticks in. You can see it threads in here pretty nicely, but the threading is pretty loose. So if you want it to stay, you might want to use a little bit of Loctite. This particular suppressor is loaded with foam and has a plastic ring. So if you want to keep this in place pretty well instead of Loctite, you can use this O-ring here. That way it has a sufficient amount of pressure against the inner barrel stabilizer to keep it from rotating out. The inner barrel is going to sit right inside the stabilizer there, and you can see without any kind of securement there or Loctite or O-ring or all, the inner barrel stabilizer has a decent amount of play with the threading in there. Now it's going to vary depending on the suppressor, because every threading, even though it's supposed to be the same, is just a hair different. This particular one is a little loose, so once it's snug against the barrel, it's pretty tight. The inner barrel stabilizer itself is pretty solid around the barrel, so virtually no play at all. The second suppressor I tried, this is a random Chinese suppressor. I honestly have no idea what brand it is. If you guys do, cool. This has actually an AEG spring in the middle, and it is foam loaded. What I did with this is the back end of the suppressor, and it is a 14mm negative thread, as well as the front is a 14mm negative thread, which is an interesting design. I went ahead and put this one in the front, and I Loctited it on so it didn't rotate out. That way the front of the barrel will actually sit in the stabilizer instead of just the back end of it. Depending on your barrel length, this could be a really good thing. This last suppressor is a compact killer. You can get these on eVike for about $35 or $40. They're rather wide, easy to disassemble, as you can see, and have quite a bit of room for acoustic felt. Yes, that is a cardboard roll, and actually it works great for a little bit of a spacer in there. With this one, I did not test it on an AEG. However, this is a point I want to make. There's a lot of threading room in here, more than 1/2 inch, which is quite a bit of room. So if you want to install an inner barrel stabilizer in here, if I could thread it the right direction, you've got a lot more room, and you've also got a lot of room for threading on the end of your outer barrel. Something like this would definitely be ideal for using one of these. In theory, the inner barrel stabilizer should give you slightly tighter groupings because of the reduced barrel vibration. Now, I like this in theory, but in practice, I'm not going to sit around and really shoot at targets too much with airsoft guns. If I'm shooting at things, it's usually people, and it's usually during an airsoft game. So I wanted to test this in a practical sense. The first AEG I tested was my Eka 1 Platinum M4. These are OEM by VSC, and this one has quite a bit of work done to it. With .2s, it's shooting about 440 feet per second, so technically it's a DMR. The inner barrel on this gun is a Mad Bull steel barrel, and it protrudes about roughly 1 inch from the tip of the outer barrel. Unfortunately, this particular suppressor doesn't have a whole lot of threading. It's less than 1/2 inch. So between the threading on the end of the outer barrel and the inner barrel stabilizer, I actually really didn't have enough for all of it. So I had to use the O-ring that was provided, plus a crush washer under there, to get it to actually fit. I wish there was a little bit more threading potential on this particular suppressor, but other suppressors do have more threading available. For my practical testing, I picked an orange spot on a tree about 150 feet away. Seemed like a reasonable spot, human-sized target, at about a distance you might shoot at an open field. This testing was done at Nighthawk Airsoft, so there were some people walking around during a game. For testing, I used 0.32 gram BBs. This particular setup, unfortunately, I really wasn't able to tell much of a difference in a practical application. My second setup here was an Echo 1 MP5K. It shoots about 320 feet per second, so a bit softer. This is just a random brass inner barrel I had sitting around, and it's about 300 millimeters long. For this test, I have a random China suppressor running the length of this, and on the end of it, sitting right about here, is the inner barrel stabilizer. So instead of at the kind of midpoint of this particular barrel, I decided to put it at the end of the barrel and see how it performed with that. The second test was with my Echo 1 MP5K. The gun shoots about 320 feet per second with a 2, but I used 0.25s for this test. I did notice the groupings on this setup were slightly tighter, which was a nice improvement. Here are my final thoughts on the inner barrel stabilizer from Airtech Studios. For me, $10 is a small investment to make to potentially get a little bit more accuracy out of your airsoft gun. Of course, this seems like it may vary depending on the setup and how you use the inner barrel stabilizer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next review.